now I'd like to hand you over to Mr. Miki, Investor Relations Head at Acea. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and welcome to the presentation on the Acea Group's results at December 24. Fabrizio Palermo, CEO and General Manager of the Acea Group, and Pier Francesco Ragni, Deputy General Manager and CFO of the group, will illustrate the results achieved. And now I'd like to hand you over to Fabrizio for the initial remarks. Good evening and welcome to you all. I would like to make reference to the regulatory and market environment that you see on slide number 2. The tariff approval by ARERA are ongoing after the local authorities have completed the approval process. The water service tariff method 4 have been approved, and the additional tariff authorizations have to be still approved. The water WACC is 6.1 versus 4.8 in 2023. As for electricity, I'd like to point out that the provisional 24 tariff was published in May and was based on the ROS tariff rules. That is to say, the total spending mechanism for the 6th regulatory period of the period of 24-27. The electricity WACC amounted to 6% in 24 versus 5.2 in 23. The energy prices in 24 reported a dramatic fall vis-à-vis 23, respectively minus 15 and minus 40% as far as energy and gas are concerned. At the 31st of December, the mid-short-term interest rates amounted to 3.5%, slightly lower than the previous year, when they stood at 3.7%, while the mid-long-term interest rates dropped vis-à-vis 23, standing at 2.6% versus 3% in 2023. Moving on to the next page. '24 marked a strong acceleration of the long-term project growth of the group. And this applies both to the industrial and the communication plan. In March, the 24-28 industrial plan was illustrated, where we defined our strategy and our objectives. That were implemented already in 24, partially, of course. So I refer in particular to the major construction sites that accounted for a real gear change. I'm referring to the Marcio Aqueduct and the Ottavia Trionfale line, so all the major water projects, and not only water projects, also the environmental projects. Then the implementation of our international strategy that we laid the foundation for by participating in the Matei plan, confirming our role in South America, particularly in Peru, where we actually manage actively our stakes in that country. Then we have launched an electrical flexibility service. We have acquired the WTE project in Rome. We have been awarded 2 major tenders in 2 regions where we were not present. It has been for years that Acea hasn't extended its geographical footprint, so we managed to enter Liguria and Sicily. Then we set up a water sub-holding company to increase our efficiency and have an increasing role in the water industry, and that we have bid for 2 major tenders in Lombardy, so outside the regions where we have been traditionally operating. Please remember that in March, Fitch improved the Acea rating from negative to stable. And then we also acquired a high voltage electricity grid that we are going to dispose of. And then starting the 1st of October 24, and this is the important point, we consolidated the aqueduct with using the net equity method. In October 24, the public partners of the Puro Aqueduct declared their will not to renew the shareholders' agreement, and even though the announcement was not made within the shareholders' pact, the need to redefine the corporate governance emerged to redefine the control of Acea. Hence, we changed the way we consolidated the Fiora Aqueduct. We are currently negotiating the new shareholders' agreement, and we are moderately optimistic about it. Coming to the results, I believe the results speak by themselves. 24 ended with all-time high results, both in terms of EBITDA and net profit. So an unprecedented result. The EBITDA reported reached 1.557 million, up 12% versus the previous year. In a way, we have achieved our business plan targets one year ahead, the plan that we announced early 24. EBITDA grew on average more than 5% that was factored in the plan. So EBITDA grew 7-9%, well above the guidance for 23. And in this regard, I would like to point out that our guidance had already been reviewed upward at the beginning of the year. As for the net debt EBITDA ratio, 24 ended with a 3.2 ratio, and again, a substantial improvement versus our guidance that had been reviewed versus the initial guidance of 3.5. 1.4 billion overall capex in 24, of which 1.2 net of subsidies. Subsidies, of course, that we have received. Moving on to slide 7, 24 highlights. As already pointed out, the reported EBITDA increased from 1.339 million at the 31st of December 23 to 1.557 billion at the 31st of December 24, up 12%, as already pointed out. Net of extraordinary items, EBITDA grew 12% on 23, up 152 million euros, of which 142 concerning regulated business. Growth has been driven mainly by water and grids, thanks to the increase of tariffs and the commercial business as well. The reported net profit amounts to 332 million, up 13% versus 23. Organic net profit is 330 million, up 51 million compared to 23, thanks to the growth in EBITDA more than offset the rise in depreciation linked to the investments in regulated business. Net and gross capex grew respectively by 26 and 19% versus the previous year, mainly driven by the growth of investment in regulated business. All in all, the net investments in 24 amounted to 1.439 billion, exceeding by 296 million investments made in the previous year. The operating cash flow amounts to 373 million, up compared to 23 by 225 million. The net debt EBITDA ratio is 3.18 times, significantly better than the previous year. And now I would like to leave the floor to Pier Francesco Ragni, the CFO of the group and Deputy Manager of the group, who will be providing more details about the financial highlights.
Thank you very much, Fabrizio, and good afternoon to you all. As we heard, the reported EBITDA 90% up, which means plus 152 million, which is thanks to the business reported in the water, lighting, and electricity distribution, which made up or offset the unfavorable scenario. Regulated businesses account for 87% of the overall EBITDA, and we have plus 19% overall. Now, if we consider the finance of funded capex, overall 1,939 million, which is plus 19 million of investments in 2023. Net profit is growing strongly, plus 18% organically, thanks to the EBITDA growth, which compensated the depreciation. Now, the EBITDA is growing by around, net debt is growing around 100 million euros. And as we said, the net debt EBITDA ratio is improving significantly versus the end of 2023, compared to the guidance we gave to the market. Now, the EBITDA is growing because of the organic growth of regulated businesses. Organic growth, excluding generation, is equal to 181 million euros. Now, we also have the effect of tariffs, and also we have the growth of investments. We have an improvement of commercial margin, and this is due to the growth of the unit margins of the customer base. Now, these features allowed us to offset the negative effect, which is due to the energy scenario, but also lower electric volumes produced because of weather events. Now, organic growth is strong and offset more than sufficiently the negative energy scenario. We see on the right the one-offs recorded in 2023 in 2024 with an overall amount of 28 million in 2023 and 42 million in 2024. Let's now move on to the net profit. Now, organic net profit, which is 18% versus the previous year, thanks to the growth of the EBITDA, which offset the depreciations. As to the financial management, here we see that it is related to the interest rate trends. Now, on the right, you see the one-offs which are related to the net profit recorded in 2023 and 2024 with an amount which is 15 million euros. Now, as to the dividend, the board of directors resolved a dividend equal to 0.85 per share, the highest dividend ever paid by Acea, growing by 8% of the dividend paid the results of 2023. Now, let me remind you, the policy dividend yield envisages an organic growth by 4% during the 5 years period. That's a dividend policy. As to the guidance, in the group invested 1 billion and 4 versus 2023, that is plus 26%. Now, 91% of investments are related to regulated businesses. Now, the capex, 260 million, were financed thanks to public subsidies. And such subsidies have grown by 200 million versus 2023, thanks to the capex made in regulated business. Now, you see here the detail of the activities carried out in 2024, also the widening of water pipes and the line, the fourth line of San Vittore. Let me move to the cash flow. The absorption of cash in 24 is equal to 100 million euros. Now, we certainly point out the good management of the working capital, but we need to underline also the good performance of the EBITDA and also the strong growth that we have recorded in Q4 of 2024, which had an impact on commercial debt. Now we had tenders at the end of the year, so the results will be reflected next year. And then we also have the tax related to the stupid bonus. Then we've had an increase, limited, of long-term regulatory receivables, which led to an increase in regulatory WACC and with a positive impact, which do not translate in cash now, but will be reflected in next year's cash. Now, so in future years, we envisage a reduction of outstanding regulated receivables. Now, as to the financial structure, the cost of debt is 2.16%, and this is related to the new tax on debts. Now, let me remind you that on the 15th of July, we reimbursed a bond of 600 million euros, had a fixed rate of 2.65%. Now, we then had two more funding through BEI of 300 million euros, and this increases the funds received by BEI to 500 million euros. Now, these funds will be used in 2025, thanks also to the maturities of bonds. In February, we reimbursed 160 million euros. In September, 200 million. Now, as to the fixed rate debt is 91%, and the duration is around 4 years. Now I'll move to the different business unit. First, the water recurrent EBITDA is growing by 13%, thanks to the increase in tariffs, which is compensated by the results of companies consolidated at net equity. Now, you see 12 million are related to the consolidation of Fiora, which accounts for 20 million, and the recognition of previous tariffs in the water business of around 35 million. Now, 2023 minus 28 million are related to the premium for the quality of service, which leads to an increase of around 200 million versus previous year, and net of public subsidies, 100 million, 17% RAB in the water business at the end of 2024 amounts to 4.8 billion euros, up 4% in 2023.
Coming now to the grids and public lighting, the recurring EBITDA grew roughly 50 million euro versus 2023, as driven by the growth of regulated tariffs. WACC increased from 5.2% to 6%, and also thanks to the growth of RAB. Capex net of subsidies increased by 8% versus the previous year. RAB on grids increased from 2.8 billion in 2023 to 3.1 billion in 2024, growing 11%. As for the environment, the recurring EBITDA dropped by 8 million because of higher margins on the waste to energy plant. CapEx increased substantially, reaching 100 million euro, mainly because of the works on the fourth line of San Vittore and the fume line at Termini. Moving on to generation, the recurring EBITDA dropped by 32%, to be exact, following the lower prices on the energy markets and lower hydroelectric volumes, especially in the central Italy. CapEx reached 26 million, dropping versus the previous year. Total energy output grew 8%, dropped by 8% from 754 gigawatt hour in 23 to 693 in 24, following the 28% drop. As for commercial business, recurring EBITDA increased by 38%, mainly driven by higher margins in the free market and thanks to energy management. This positive component has been partially offset by the loss of the non-recurring events. CapEx increased by 17 million versus 23, mainly because of higher costs in acquiring new clients, new customers. And finally, the 25 guidance. We expect EBITDA growing by 2 to 3% versus 24, versus the restated EBITDA 24. The 24 restated EBITDA has been calculated by adjusting the reported EBITDA of 1.57 billion, and then has been adjusted following the scope changes as already described. We have, I'm sorry, the speaker says, we have not considered the Del Fiore aqueduct for 18 months, and we have not included high voltage line that is the subject of a binding agreement with Terna signed end 24. As for 2025 EBITDA, our guidance didn't factor in the contribution of a high voltage line for the month before the disposal, and the Flora Aqueduct has been consolidated at net equity for 12 months. As for net debt EBITDA ratio, we expect a 3.5 times. In our estimates, we factored in the sale of the high voltage network, considering only the proceeds from Terna of 224 million, whereas the incentives from ARERA amounting to 23 million is expected to take place in 26. Thank you very much. So this is the end of the presentation. We can start the question and answer session. This is the Chorus Call operator. We can now start the Q&A session. Anyone who wishes to ask a question may press star followed by 1 on his or her touch-tone telephone. To remove yourself from the question queue, please press star followed by 2. Please use the receiver when asking questions. Anyone who has a question may press star and 1 at this time. First question by Roberto Letizia, Equita.
Good evening, and thank you very much for the presentation. I have a few questions, and maybe I'll come back to you after colleagues. I would like to focus on 2025, trying to analyze the possible change in the perimeter of Acea. Now, you talked about the possibilities and the opportunities on the retail business. How much is the retail business as part of Acea strategy? Now that is going quite well. I'd like to know whether you can tell me something about the working capital in Q4. I'd like to know how much the improvement that you mentioned is structural, or whether it will be absorbed in the first part of 2025. Now, if possible, can you also give me a summary of the moving parts of 2025 and main drivers, and what kind of contingency have you factored in the growth of EBITDA by 2-3%? Now, you said that, of course, there's a contingency like the activation of the high voltage network. So, any possible change to the guidance that you provided? Thank you very much. And then perhaps I'll come back to you, to my colleagues. Now, as to the first question, that is the retail business, we repeat what we have always said. That is that this is a business which is part of our scope, and as all of our businesses, we are certainly open to any solution and opportunity you might have on the market. Nothing more, nothing less. This is what we have always said, and what we confirmed with our business plan. As to the data dynamics, how much the improvement is of a structural nature. Now, let me tell you what I said during the presentation. That is, in 2024, we had a positive effect in Q4, which is mainly related to the concentration of meaningful capex in Q4. Certainly, in 2025, we will have to pay the capex made in Q4, and this within the guidance will realign the ratio of the net financial position EBITDA. Now, as to the other question you asked, 2025 in terms of net working capital dynamics will be neutral, as mentioned among the targets of our business plan. As the moving parts, 2025, the year will be characterized by a number of different phenomena. For instance, the organic growth related to the new 2024 regulatory plan and with the growth of the energy business, the water business. Despite the regulatory WACC is decreasing by 3.4%, this is offset by tariff growth and the physiological growth of RAB. Now, EBITDA, as I always said, and as we always remembered, we expect the growth of competitive pressure. As for other businesses, we expect a mild growth in terms of the environmental business and also generation business. Should there be an improvement of weather conditions versus what we had last year. Now, as to the guidance for the net debt EBITDA, yeah, there's a contribution for 6 months of the Terna grid. Sorry, your sound was not very clear. I'd like to know whether in the EBITDA guidance, the ratio net debt EBITDA does not include the 6 months of Terna. Now, the EBITDA for 2025 in the guidance was calculated as if we had no high voltage business starting from the 1st of January 2025. So this also applies to the net debt EBITDA ratio. Okay, yes. Okay, thank you.
Next question, Javier Suarez at Mediobanca. Good evening. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for taking my question. Thank you for the presentation. So my first question refers to the dividend policy of the group. We have seen the dividend in 23 growing more than the guidance and ahead of the business plan targets. So the dividend that they're going to pay on 24, can it be considered as a basis on which to apply the 4% dividend ratio that you factored in the previous business plan? So can we consider 24 as the starting point, let's say, of this 4% growth of dividends up to 28? The second question refers to the guidance again. Can you please provide us with the guidance also as far as net income is concerned for 25? I believe the consensus is around 300, 340 million euro, probably slightly lower. Do you feel confident with that figure? And then the third question and the fourth question refer more to your strategy. I'd like to know if the group is interested in acquiring assets in gas and distribution that Italgas is going to dispose of. Is this something that might be interesting for Acea Group? And then I would like to know whether the measures adopted to mitigate the impact of high energy prices that may have an impact on the working capital of the company. And then I would like to know if you can provide us with more info about the upfront payment for Acea should the agreement to extend the useful life of the asset by 20 years, what could be the upfront payment that Acea will have to bear? I can answer your last question. Our RAB for energy distribution is 3 billion. So the upfront payment to extend the useful life will depend on the request of the regulator. So in other words, it is a math calculation that you have to make between our RAB and the percentages that the government will apply. As for our dividend policy, what I said during the presentation is what I'm going to repeat now. Our guidance remains the same that was factored in our business plan. So our guidance is exactly the same. The payout of this year is the result of, again, results higher than expected. As for the guidance on net income, we do not provide such guidance in line with our past, let's say. As for the gas network, well, recently, assets that are going to be disposed of by Italgas were published recently. As already pointed out, we take very seriously any opportunity that might arise. We own the part of the network in some regions of the country. We will be certainly following the future evolutions. I cannot tell you now what our final decision will be. As for the impact on our net working capital of the higher energy prices, we know that the government is going to adopt measures that will lead to a kind of reduction of 1 billion of tariffs with a negative impact on our working capital. So if the 1.6 billion that is going to be provided as a subsidies to households, the impact would be 0.8 billion euros in our case. That is tantamount to roughly 6% of the charges, the country charges. I don't know if I can tell you more than this. This is our best guess. Well, thank you very much. Next question, Emanuele Uggioni at Kepler Cheuvreux.
Thank you. Good evening to you all. Thank you very much for the presentation. I have a few questions which are related to the approval of the tariffs for 2025. Some tariffs were approved, others were not. Can you give us an update here? And then to what extent this is included in your guidance for the growth of the EBITDA, and to what extent this will be an upside versus the guidance. Second question, I'd like to have a clarification on RAB. You usually give us the gross data of the grants. Can you give us the net value of these grants and the breakdown of these grants as well, net? And then a third question on the net working capital, the regulatory net working capital. There is those related to mismatch between ARERA and the tariff increase of the different actors. At the end of 9 months, the value was 600 million. Can you tell us the data at the end of 2024? And then what are your expectations related to the reduction of that amount in 2025 and also within the business plan period? Now, you said that the starting point was 500 million euros at the end of 2023, and you thought you could halve this amount within the business plan period. And then a question on waste. Recently, a piece of news was published about the stop of works of the waste to energy submitted line because of controls on the part of the authority. Do you see any delay there that might contribute negatively to the EBITDA of this business unit? Thank you very much. Now, let me answer your question about the approval of tariffs. Now, in our water world, tariffs have all been approved by the authorities. ARERA has not approved, has approved, ARTO 2, sorry, and the others are expected to be approved shortly. Now, the tariffs that have been approved are in line with our business plan and are factored in our own 2025 guidance. Now, let me go to the last question that you asked, and then we'll answer all of your questions. Last question about the temporary stop of the works of the fourth line of San Vittore. At the moment, we are establishing a dialogue with the relevant authority, and we are trying to solve the situation as soon as possible. At the moment, I can only tell you that we are focusing and paying attention to this item. That's all I can tell you. Now, as to the absorption of the regulator activity for 2029, said all rebalancing have to be, in a way, discharge, so to speak, on the energy bills. Cosa? Scaricati. Scaricati in fattura, ma come si dice qua? Next question by Francesco Sala with Banca Akros.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your results. I got a couple of questions too. First of all, what is your visibility about the tenders in the water business that you have bid for? And are you planning to bid for other tenders as well? And then in the light of the 24 results, are you considering updating your business plan? If yes, when? And my final question, just a few words about the WTE. What is the timing there? And when do you think the WTE can be included in your turnover in the next years. So as for visibility on the hydroelectric tenders, out of the tenders that we have bid for, we are waiting for the final decision, and therefore I cannot tell you when this is going to happen. As for the update of our industrial plan, our business plan, well, definitely we're going to update it. It will be probably in the second part of the year, also because we are following the evolution of the extension of the concessions for distribution of low and medium voltage that account for a substantial share of our EBITDA. As for the WTE, waste to energy plan, well, there's been a temporary award to the consortium that includes also Acea. Currently, the final evaluations are being made, and we expect that the tender to be awarded shortly. Project financing is being negotiated with the banks, but will not be consolidated because it's a non-recourse project financing project. Next question, Davide Candela at Intesa Sanpaolo.
Now, good afternoon, and thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you for taking my questions. I have a question about the 2025 guidance. It's more a clarification, I have to say. Now, some other tariffs were approved somewhat late. I wonder whether the 2025 guidance includes also the tariff increase obtained in 2024 or only the new approval of new tariffs in 2025. There's another question, and perhaps you did not answer the question of the colleague, the net grants for water and electricity. Now, as to the net RAB, we do not provide the data for the net RAB. As to the net working capital, so as to the equalizations in 2024, well, because of new regulations, they improved in 2025, but they will have to be invoiced in 2025. As to the question about late approvals, well, everything was provided for in or made provisions in 2024, so there's no impact on our concessions in 2025. Next question is a follow-up question by Emanuele Oggioni with Kepler Cheuvreux.
Yes, I actually wanted to ask the same question about RAB, so I'm going to ask you a different question on waste. In 25, considering the results achieved in 24, negative result following the reduction of volumes as well as the drop in prices of electricity generated with waste to energy, and considering the drop in volumes of treatment business, can you provide us with a more detailed outlook for 25 as far as waste is concerned? Well, in 24, waste business reported an EBITDA drop of roughly 9% because of the overall energy landscape that had a major impact. So we expect to recover in 2025 a part of what we lost in 24. Thank you very much.
Anyone who wishes To ask a question, you may press star followed by one on your telephone. The next question is a follow-up question by Fabio Soares with Mediobanca. Now, thank you. Now, I have a question which I still have is about the supply business. You you talk about the different moving pieces. You mentioned the normalization that will occur in the next few years. Now, could you perhaps give us more specific guidance of the business supply guidance in 2025?
Business supply, the energy.
Thanks. Now, we do not give a specific guidance on the individual business unit. Now, the reported EBITDA already includes a number of one-offs amounting to 170 million. In 2023, they amounted to 130 million. So basically, that is the overall range that we can expect. Thank you. And remind you that if you have a question, you can press a star and one on your telephone. Ladies and gentlemen, there appear to be no other questions from the conference call. Well, thank you very much for taking part into this conference call. Let me remind you that the investor relations team is available should you have any question or request for clarification.